Hey YouTube, welcome to my studio. My name's Rich. So today we're going to be looking at a technique called focus stacking. So we're going to talk about what it is, when to use it, why you want to use it, how to actually accomplish it, and then we'll take some pictures. So focus stacking is a technique of taking multiple images of the same subject from the same perspective, where each image has a different segment or a different slice of the photograph in sharp focus. And then combining those together with software so that you obtain a final image where the entire subject is in focus, or at least the portions that you want it to be in focus, right? So why would you want to do this? Basically, what you want to use this to overcome limitations of depth of field or depth of focus. So situations where that might arise is going to be landscape photography in low light. Maybe you're shooting down low, you have some flowers or some grass in the foreground, you have some mountains in the background, and you either can't or don't want to stop down far enough to be able to achieve sharp focus everywhere. So with focus stacking, you can take a series of 3, 5, 10, 50, 100 images and selectively focus a portion of the subject in each of those images and then use the software to combine them together. You want to make sure that you've got the camera fixed on a tripod, and you want to make sure your subject is not moving, because the software needs to be able to automatically align that. Keep in mind, some lenses will actually change the size of the image as you focus. So you probably, if you got a lens you haven't done this with before, you want to shoot some test shots and make sure that doesn't cause any grief with your processing software. The other situation where focus stacking comes into play is extreme close-up macro photography. So when you're shooting very close with high magnifications, the depth of field is going to be just razor thin. So today I'm going to be shooting with my macro bellows. I don't know if you can see that. So there's my subject. It's a little beetle I plucked out of the garden yesterday, and I'll try to get a shot through the viewfinder of the camera, through the on the screen of the camera, and you'll see when I focus on this little guy, the depth of field is minuscule. It's probably less than a millimeter. I'm going to go back and I'll do some annotations at the very end and try to calculate what the actual magnification ratio of this is. But I've got this guy basically filling the frame, and I want to say he's about 5 or 6 millimeters wide on a 24 millimeter sensor, so he's probably 4 to 1 magnified. So there's a couple ways of actually setting up the shots. You can either move the subject, or you can move the camera, or you can refocus the lens. For macro photography, generally the easiest thing to do is to just move the camera between shots, and there's a number of ways to do that. A lot of macro bellows setups, and if you're looking for macro bellows, I would recommend getting one that has a focusing rail built into it. I'm going to just zoom in here a little bit. So this is a Nikon Bellows PB6, and this comes with a built-in focus rail. So you'll see these two knobs actually adjust the front and the rear bellows to make them further apart for increasing or decreasing magnification and for focusing. And then the entire unit rides back and forth on this rail. There's a knob on the other side that lets you slide it back and forth. So this works pretty well. There's a scale on it. But for doing extreme close-up like this, where you really need to be able to move less than a millimeter, it works, but it's not ideal. It's a little tricky to get the movement right. So I've actually added another unit on this, and it gets a little bit unwieldy. This is a Manfrotto focusing stage, and this actually is driven by this little lead screw here that lets you move the focusing stage or the entire camera and lens forward and aft in very, very, very small increments. You can probably move this, a tenth of a millimeter or less pretty easily. And if you're doing something that's really critical, I just got this last week. I haven't really had a chance to go through all the details. But what I'm going to probably do is I'll set up a scale or a digital caliper and figure out exactly how much this moves with one turn of the screw, or I'll count the threads on the screw. In any event, a quarter of a turn or half a turn of this little screw here moves the camera forward and back a small amount, and then I'll take a shot with that. You could also move the subject, so you could put the subject on a similar platform here. You don't necessarily need to have fancy gear to do this. It just makes things easier. I've seen a couple of DIY rigs. Probably the simplest one and the easiest one to do is to go find an old drill press vise or a machinist's vise. Either build a tripod mount onto that or a platform to hold your subject, and you can use the lead screw of that to move things back and forth, and you'll get pretty granular control and not spend a lot of money. You could probably find one at a garage sale for maybe $10. So that's basically what we're going to do. I'm going to probably come in close here and sort of show you the setup just at a high level. So what I've got here is I've got my bellows, I've got my camera set up, I have my subject sitting on this little piece of corian here. I've got the on-camera flash set for its lowest light setting. I think it's a 32nd of its total power. And if you can see here, the flash is going to shoot forward, and the lens and the bellows is going to block 90% of the light from that, which is fine. It's actually what I want. And then I've got two speed lights set up here in slave mode, so that when they see the light from this flash, these are each going to fire, and I've got these set for about 50% power. If I had a little more room to work, I probably would want these guys, sitting out here aiming a little bit more towards the subject. The light's going to be a little funky on this, but this is not about making a beautiful image. This is about technique. So let me come over here and sort of show you what we got on the camera. Okay, so this is the live view on the camera. One of the annoying things about live view on this Nikon D5100, and I don't need to go back and look at the settings, but as far as I know, what it's trying to do is it's trying to show you as close as it can the actual image you're going to get. And it's really annoying in a couple situations. One is doing it very close at macro photography. The other thing is for like astrophotography. What you end up seeing in the viewfinder is basically a field of black. I'm using a gigantic amount of flash power here, so I'm going to get a good exposure, but the camera thinks I'm shooting, in a coal mine. So what you need to do to get a decent live view is you need to pump up the ISO on the camera. I've got it pumped up, I think, beyond 6400, so pretty much to the ceiling. I'm actually going to shoot this down at ISO 100, but to set the shot up and get the initial focus, you need to pump the ISO up. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And it's a little hard to see here, but essentially what I've got here, let me get a pointer. So I've got just the far side of my subject here pretty much in sharp focus. I'm maybe just a little bit past it. And then you can see as I move the camera back, and I'm just turning the screw on the focus rail, you can see that the point that's in sharp focus, actually I was probably a little too far. So now I got pretty good focus right about there. As I come closer, you can see the front coming into sharper focus until I'm all the way at the very beginning, right? And I'm here, and now I've got good focus on the front, right? So I'm going to take a series of shots basically along the way to get my final image. So I'm going to go ahead and just move forward. It doesn't matter if you start at the back of the subject or the front of the subject. It makes no difference at all. All right, so I'm going to start right about there. As you can probably see, touching anything makes this all stuff, even this is a pretty rigid setup with a good tripod. Things wiggle around, so you want to be very, very gentle and try not to disturb anything as you're shooting. So let's go ahead and put the ISO back down to 100. See, there's my live view. And then I'm going to stop this lens down, I guess about 3 stops, and then we'll shoot a test frame. I'm actually pretty happy with that exposure. I think that's going to be good. So that's my first frame. So now I'm going to back the camera up, and I'm just going to go ahead and do half a turn of the screw on this focusing stage. So that's a half a turn. Take our next shot, and you can pardon all the beeping. That's my flashes telling me they fired. Half a turn, take a shot, half a turn, take a shot, And when you're doing this, it's probably not a bad idea to turn off live view because it can cause a bit of vibration in the whole setup. Obviously, I'm just doing this for filming purposes. Once you've got it set up and you're sort of taking your stack of images, you don't necessarily need to see what's going on. I mean, you can turn live view back on again and kind of spot check it. And I'm just going to keep going until I'm sort of past the point of closest focus on this guy. And I think that's right about there. All right, so that's my images. What did I shoot? About a dozen or so. Now we're going to go ahead and take these images. We'll bring them into Lightroom, and then we're going to bring them into Photoshop, and I'll show you how we actually do the stacking in Photoshop. It's actually quite simple, and the results, at least to me, are pretty magical. So here we go.
Okay, so I've got my images imported into Lightroom. I should mention there's a number of software packages you can use to actually perform the stacking function. I like to use Lightroom and Photoshop. I think they do just a perfectly fine job, and I already own Lightroom and Photoshop, or already licensed Lightroom and Photoshop because they're incredibly convenient for all sorts of general purpose, post-processing work. Lightroom in particular, I really like to use. It's easy to use, it's deceptively powerful, and the interface with Photoshop is pretty seamless. You can get Lightroom and Photoshop as part of the Adobe Creative Cloud for like $10 a month, and in my opinion, that's money well spent. So these are raw files. You want to shoot these in RAW if at all possible, because you're going to be doing a lot of processing on them, and you'll give up the least amount of quality if you can start with raw files. So the first thing you should do is you should go in to the images, and you should make any sort of adjustments you want to make in terms of exposure, contrast, color balance, anything like that. And you can just do that on a single image, typically. Develop that one and then sync the settings across all the images, or you can do them individually, whatever sort of works for your particular set of images. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my images by just going up here and hitting shift click. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say edit in Photoshop as layers. And we're going to go ahead and we'll fire up Photoshop. And depending on how fast your PC is, this will take a minute or maybe two. This is a decently fast machine. This is a quad-core Intel Core i5 with 16 gig of RAM. So it's not too bad. I don't have any accelerated video on this, not yet at least. So it'll take about maybe 45 seconds to go ahead and do all the processing and open all the layers for this. And we'll go ahead and wait while that happens. I'll probably go ahead and pause the video. But you can see we're loading layers. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to create a new layer for each section of the final image that's going to have a portion of its focus selected. And there's really two steps involved. One is having Photoshop go ahead and align all the layers, because you're moving the camera or you're moving the subject. Things aren't going to be in perfect alignment. So Photoshop can go ahead and take care of that. It can handle aligning them for you. And one thing I did mention when I was setting these up is you want to make sure that you leave yourself some room around the edges, because when you realign the images, you're going to end up with some raggedy edges that you're going to want to crop out later. I didn't do that in this case. I just went ahead and dropped this guy on my little piece of plastic and started shooting. So I'm going to end up probably losing some of the image when I do my final crop, and that's just fine for this. So I think I got maybe one more layer to load. All right, so that's it. So now layers are loaded. Oh, no, they're not. Now all my layers are loaded, and I seem to have gotten an extra one here. So we're just going to delete that layer. Yep. So the first thing to do is select all your layers. Again, just go to the top and the bottom, hit shift click, and then we're going to go to edit, and we're going to auto align the layers. And just click auto and select OK. Now Photoshop's going to go through and analyze the images and make sure all the images are in correct alignment. And it uses that by finding the edges and finding the points. And again, we're going to end up with some unusable area around the outside of the images, and that's just fine. When you set your shot up, just make sure that you account for that and leave yourself a little bit of breathing room. So again, this will take a minute or so to just go ahead and process all this. this is about 20 layers, or this is exactly 20 layers. That's what you're going to end up typically for doing, sort of high res macro work. If you're doing a landscape shot, your depth of field is probably not so dramatically thin, so you might end up with only 3 or 4 layers. It kind of depends on what your final result needs to be. So that's it. So now the layers are all aligned, and then to actually create the stack, you go up to Edit, and now we're going to do Auto Blend. There's 2 blend modes. There's Panorama and there's Image Stack. We're going to choose Stack. You can play with the options here. I generally just leave the defaults. I'll click OK. So now Photoshop is going to go through and it's going to analyze each image, and it's going to find the portions of each image that are in focus, that are clear. And then it's going to create a layer mask for each layer that will mask out all the portions of that layer that are not in focus. Once that's done, it's going to go ahead and merge them all together. I'm sorry, we're going to go ahead and merge them all together to create a single layered image with all of the subject in sharp focus. So now we're creating the layer masks, and when you get done, if you actually look over at the layers, you can see the mask that was created, and you can see the areas of focus that were selected for each layer. If you wanted to, you could go in there and edit those layer masks if you wanted to make adjustments. So here's my actual layer masking, and you can see it's selected bits and pieces from each image. So once that's done, now this is my image with everything in focus front to back. The last thing we'll do is we're going to go to Layer here, and we're going to merge our layers, and then we will hit Save. Now once it's saved, exit Photoshop, come back to Lightroom, and there's our new image. So again, like I said, I didn't leave enough room around the outside to account for the raggedy edges I'm going to end up with. So I'm going to need to crop this a little bit. So we'll just go ahead and pick the crop tool, and we'll just clean that up a little bit. That looks pretty good. So there's our final image. You can see that we've got nice focus achieved across the entire beetle. We've got a lot of fantastic detail. We got some beautiful colors in there. The last thing I'm going to do before I finish up the video is I'm just going to give you an idea of the kind of ridiculous magnification ratios that you can generate in the comfort of your own home with some fairly inexpensive gear. I've used probably pretty good stuff here, but you can get a bellows and an old and larger lens that'll go onto your DSLR or your mirrorless for well under $100. And let me show you what the magnification ratios that you can expect with this kind of setup are. So I'm just going to go ahead and quit out of here, and I'll be back momentarily.
Okay, so here's our beetle, and I went ahead and measured him, and he's just about 10 millimeters or so. So that's his actual size. So to view this guy at a 1:1 macro reproduction ratio, we would want to see a final image that's 10 millimeters. We're going to look at that guy a little bit larger here. So I went ahead and took that final JPEG, and I've got that on my TV. And I went ahead and I grabbed, where do we go here? The tape measure, and this image is about 40 inches wide. That's about 1,000 millimeters. So by my rough calculations, we can very easily magnify this guy 100 to 1, which is, I think, pretty good. Even a really high quality microscope has a hard time getting to 100 to 1 unless you got something really expensive. So that's focus stacking with ultra close-up macro photography. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. And if you like that, please click the like button. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.